Strange Planet with Richard Serra from AM 740.
After our government tells us the truth about UFOs, what then? The day after disclosure, when Strange Planet continues in a moment.
Someone or something came into my room and it took me away.
Imagine you're driving along some lonely stretch of highway one night and your car engine suddenly dies. You manage to get the car to the side of the road and get out to see what the problem might be, and you're suddenly blinded by an incredible light. You look up and see an immense disc hovering silently above you. The next moment, you're lying on a cold, flat surface being probed and prodded by a room full of tall, thin aliens. You lose consciousness. The next thing you remember, you're back on the side of the road next to your car, trying to account for 5 hours of missing time. Welcome to the alien abduction phenomena. Daryl Sims, aka the Alien Hunter, has been studying the alien abduction phenomenon for nearly 40 years, ever since he was first taken aboard a spacecraft against his will.
It started at age 4. It ended, it went on for until I was 17, and during that 13-year period, I had about 10 abductions. And then the last one ended violently, very violent, and very conscious. And after that, they didn't do anything until I had my son. And after my son was born, he was about 6, and they came after him.
In the typical alien abduction, the victim is paralyzed by some unknown force, taken to a small circular room, and then examined and probed by a number of large-eyed, gray-skinned, hairless, short creatures. Tissues and cells are sampled, and subcutaneous implants are often installed. And this is no rare phenomenon. According to a Roper poll conducted in the early 90s, about 4 million Americans may be alien abductees.
45% of the abductees that we have found, and this includes around the world, are Native American and then Irish Celtic. 35% report surgical work or implantation of some type. 62% of the women report a missing fetus or gynecological anomalies.
Daryl Sims, I'm afraid, doesn't share the view that these alien civilizations visiting our planet are here to share technology and spread a message of intergalactic peace and love. He warns us not to make the mistake of assuming that just because they're technologically advanced, that they are likewise spiritually advanced.
I've got 2 dead children up in Dallas, Texas, that died as a result of their abductions on the same day. I said, tell me, convince this mother of these 2 children who heard her children, she was abducted at the same time, screaming in the other room on board this craft. Tell me that this was okay.
Of course, if the entire alien abduction phenomena proves to be the internally generated product of people's imaginations, if there are in reality no aliens and no alien abductions, I think we'd all engage in a collective sigh of relief. But tell that to the estimated 5 to 6% of the general population that believe they were captured, examined, and then left to cope with the unimaginable psychological, physical, and social effects of the experience. No, something is going on. And my recommendation? It's time to stop watching the skies and start watching your back. I'm Richard SYRETT.
Richard Serrett's Conspiracy Show airs live every Sunday night at 11 on Zoomer Radio, AM 740. Strange Planet with Richard Serrett from AM 740.
After our government tells us the truth about UFOs, what then? The day after disclosure, when Strange Planet continues in a moment.
If there's anyone out there who still doesn't believe this constitutes a full-blown crisis, I suggest speaking to one of the millions of Americans whose lives have been turned upside down.
Assuming the government's been keeping the truth about UFOs and aliens from us for our entire lives, what happens when they finally are forced to reveal that truth, whatever that might be? Knowing for certain there are advanced extraterrestrial civilizations out there possibly interacting with human civilization is sure to rock all of our worlds beyond our wildest imagination. How will we react? How will knowing the truth about UFOs change life here on Earth? One practical consideration. UFOs, whatever they may be, certainly aren't getting around on internal combustion engines. And if we get our hands on that alien propulsion system, it's probably the end of oil, and that's certainly going to upset the existing order. Richard Dolan is an historian and the author of AD, After Disclosure, A People's Guide to Life After Contact.
The whole world is dependent on it, and the whole world hates it. We all understand this. But the point remains. It's not just our energy infrastructure that depends on petroleum. Our entire the global financial structure is essentially a petroleum-dependent system in so many ways. And so there's going to be a lot of crazy valuations in the stock market in the several years after this, and that's something that a lot of people will be concerned about. That's just one issue.
Another important consideration: what about the millions of people, according to one Roper poll, who believe they've been abducted by aliens? How are they going to react once they find out their government has known about this phenomenon and said nothing and did nothing?
They are going to lash out at the government and say, hey, you know what? You guys knew this, and I was forced to live my whole life dealing with this trauma and as an outcast and being ostracized because of it. And I'll guarantee you there will be many, many lawyers willing to take up that case. Defense contractor lawsuits. One defense contractor has access to exotic ET technology, let's say. Another one doesn't, loses out on a contract. Lawsuits. Go figure.
There's something happening here.
In the 60s, cynicism over the Vietnam War caused massive distrust of societal institutions, which, when coupled with the introduction of recreational drugs into American society, led to a counterculture revolution. According to Richard Dolan, UFO disclosure will likely have a similar effect.
We've had our future really held hostage by this secrecy. So there's going to be a lot of very angry people, and clearly one of the questions that they're going to be asking is, how have you been able to keep this secret from us all these years? That's going to lead to some serious questions about manipulation of mainstream media, political world, the academic world. People are going to lose trust in all of those institutions.
Throughout the history of humankind, we've stared adversity, calamity, and crisis in the face. Somehow, we always manage to survive, and we will survive UFO disclosure, if we can get our heads screwed on straight. So, look up, brace yourself, no fear. I'm Richard Serrett.
Richard Serrett's Conspiracy Show airs live every Sunday night at 11 on Zoomer Radio, AM 740. Strange Planet with Richard Serrett from AM 740.
It was one of the largest mass UFO sightings in history, but the military continues to insist the mile-wide formation of lights in the sky were flares. The Phoenix Lights, when Strange Planet continues in a moment.
Major sighting here. It was a giant V, all right? And the right side of the V went over us. The left side was like a couple blocks over it.
People say they saw strange lights. A series of strange bright lights seen over the skies of Arizona gets a lot of people wondering what the heck they...
The evening of March 13th, 1997, thousands of Arizona residents, including the governor, witness a silent, mile-wide V-shaped formation of lights slowly gliding overhead. Reports also flooded in from Nevada and the Mexican state of Sonora. It has become known as the Phoenix Lights phenomenon. And to UFO researchers, only the UFO crash near Roswell, New Mexico in 1947 ranks higher in importance.
The data speaks for itself. Plus, I have photographs that cannot be explained or denied.
Dr. Lynn Katai was an internationally acclaimed physician and public health educator living in Phoenix at the time. She was also one of the first witnesses.
I happened to catch this object, phenomena, whatever you want to call it, craft, head on, turning into a V shape. The next morning I called around, found air traffic controllers at Sky Harbor International Airport who shared with me, they were excited that I had seen them at a distance, that they were in restricted airspace, they did not show up on radar, and when they brought up their binoculars to look, because they were so unusual, In their own words, they describe them as 6 points of light, 6 orbs that seem to be attached to something over a mile wide.
If you had been here 10 years ago and standing out here and looking up there at the lights and the view, you would have been astounded. You would have been amazed.
In March 2007, former Arizona Governor Fife Symington finally admitted he had witnessed one of the crafts of unknown origin during the '97 event, but noted that he didn't go public with the information. In fact, shortly after the lights, Symington held a press conference stating that they found out who was responsible. He then trotted out a man dressed in a ridiculous alien costume, much to the delight of the snickering local press.
And suddenly I get a call from the head of PR, one of the PR people from the Air National Guard here, and she says, "Oh, Dr. Lynn, I think we know what those lights were back in March." I said, "You do?" She said, and I was excited, finally. Somebody was giving an answer, and she said, "Would you believe that nobody ever looked at the log for visiting Air National Guard, and the Maryland Air National Guard was in town sending off flares, so that must be what some people saw." That was her words. And I said, "And you're telling me that these flares that can't keep a formation for more than a couple minutes at all, if at all, glided the entire state in a V-shaped formation for hours?" And she said, "Oh, I have a call coming in. I'll get back to you."
Since the Phoenix Lights incident, civilians in nearly 20 countries have reported seeing immense triangular-shaped craft as much as a mile across. 2 nurses in northern Ontario reported a craft so large it blacked out the stars in the sky.
I'm learning that this is happening worldwide. What's going on here? What is this?
The truth cannot be denied any longer, and the public will no longer accept pathetic attempts by the government, the military, or the mainstream media to deny or cover up these sightings. Clearly, we know something is out there, and we deserve the truth. We're ready for the truth. I'm Richard Serrett.
Richard Serrett's Conspiracy Show airs live every Sunday night at 11 on Zoomer Radio, AM 740. Strange Planet with Richard Serrett from AM 740.
What if I were to tell you that the moon is not what it appears? That it is not just another satellite orbiting a planet Earth, but an entity which has thrown the minds of some of the greatest thinkers and scientific brains into a quandary and bewilderment unprecedented in the history of astronomy. Who built the moon? When Strange Planet continues in a moment.
We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other thing, not because they are easy, but because they are hard.
Well, it's a marvelous night for a Moondance with
The moon, as has been noted by several scientists, is an impossible object. Not only is the moon extremely odd in its construction, it also behaves in a way that is nothing less than miraculous. It is widely regarded as the strangest object in the known universe. If it was not exactly the size, mass, and distance it has been at each stage of the Earth's evolution, there would be no intelligent life here.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Alan Butler is a British researcher, and his conclusion, published in his book, Who Built the Moon, is it is not a naturally occurring body and was quite possibly engineered to sustain life on Earth.
Any planet that's going to sustain life has to be very steady. It has to maintain its equilibrium. And the Earth is so big and orbits in such a way around the Earth that it, for example, keeps the Earth standing upright. There is a theory that if it weren't for the Moon, the Earth would keep tippling over on its orbit because it is a very unstable planet.
Consider the following. The Moon is 400 times smaller than the Sun, but 400 times closer to the Earth, so that both the Sun and the Moon appear to be precisely the same size in the sky, which gives us the phenomenon we call a total eclipse. Whilst we take this for granted, it's been called the biggest coincidence in the universe. Furthermore, the moon mirrors the movement of the sun in the sky by rising and setting at the same point on the horizon as the sun does at opposite solstices. There is no logical reason why the moon mimics the sun in this way, and it is only meaningful to a human standing on the Earth. Yet this isn't the end of these lunar anomalies. Once again, Who Built the Moon author Alan Butler.
Let's look at the size of the moon. Although we generally think of the year as having 365 days, those are solar days. In a true sense, in terms of turning on its own axis, the Earth's year is actually 366 days in length. Now, then we look at the moon and we see that the moon is 1366 of the Earth. In other words, 3.66 moons would make the Earth. It's also extraordinary.
Could it be that the moon is artificial? Or does the moon really exist through some happy accident? Or is a blueprint apparent? And if so, who was the architect? The question of why the moon had to be built is easy to answer: to produce all life, especially humans. As to who did it, well, that's a lot tougher. And the conclusion drawn by Butler and his co-author, Christopher Knight, is perhaps even more fantastical than the artificial moon theory itself. Alan Butler.
Now, we are getting to the stage now in terms of physics where we are talking about traveling in time. We have all sorts of experiments going on in the world at the moment, both which are able, or will be able soon, to push particles backwards or forwards in time, which would make time travel ultimately a reality. And bearing in mind that we have more to gain from the moon being where it is than anybody else, we had to ask ourselves the question, could it have been us that created the moon?
Coincidence that the moon's diameter is exactly 400 times smaller than that of the sun? Coincidence that the moon exactly blocks the sun's disk during a solar eclipse?
Too many coincidences to accept as pure chance for me. Still, for most people, the suggestion that the moon could be artificial is as sensible as saying it's made of green cheese. I'm Richard Serrett.
Richard Syrett's Conspiracy Show airs live every Sunday night at 11 on Zoomer Radio, AM 740.